We're always told to fight our bad habits, right? To just crush them with pure willpower. But what if that's the very reason we keep failing? Today, we're going to dive into a Japanese system for change that completely flips our understanding of habits on its head.
Just think about it. Every time you've tried to break a bad habit, you probably went to war with it. You resisted it, you fought it, you tried to force it out of your life. But what if that struggle, that very fight, is what's actually giving the habit its power? This system suggests there's a much gentler and way more effective path.
Okay, so get this. There's a story about a guy who smoked for 20 years. He tried everything, spent a fortune on patches, therapy, even hypnosis. Nothing stuck. But it wasn't some brutal force of will that finally set him free. Nope. It was a simple conversation with a Japanese monk who showed him a philosophy that seemed, honestly, almost too easy to actually work.
So, to really grasp this new way of thinking, we first have to understand why our usual approach, what we can call the willpower trap, fails us so often. And right here, this is the fundamental difference. The old way, the Western way, often treats a bad habit like an enemy you have to defeat. It relies on force, and when you fail, it motivates with shame. The new way, the Japanese system, sees it completely differently. A habit isn't an enemy, it's just a pattern. It doesn't require willpower, it requires awareness. And it's not about shame, it's about compassion.
And you've seen this willpower trap in action, right? We all have. It's the super intense gym plan in January that's completely abandoned by February. It's deleting all your social media apps in a fit of determination, only to sneakily reinstall them a few days later. We make these huge, dramatic promises to ourselves, and when we can't keep up, we're just left feeling ashamed. It's a cycle that sets us up to fail from the very start.
Okay, so if fighting is the problem, what's the solution? Well, that brings us to the first huge mind shift in this whole system. Observe, don't fight.
This whole idea is beautifully illustrated by the story of a monk who was just constantly battling his own anger, and the harder he fought it, the angrier he got. An older, wiser monk gave him this really simple advice. Stop trying to get rid of it. Instead, just get curious about it. Watch it like it's a cloud passing through the sky.
And this all ties back to a really core concept in Buddhist thought, impermanence. It's the simple truth that nothing lasts forever. That desperate craving you get for a cigarette or that intense magnetic pull to check your phone, it feels so permanent in that moment, doesn't it? But it's not. It's just a temporary wave of sensation that will rise, peak, and then fall, all on its own if you just let it be.
So, how temporary are we talking? You might be surprised. The research shows that the peak intensity of most cravings only lasts about 3 to 5 minutes. That is it, just a few minutes. If you can learn to just sit with that feeling, to ride the wave for that short amount of time, you discover something absolutely incredible. You don't actually have to act on it.
And this isn't just theory. Let me give you a real-world example. A businessman in Tokyo used this exact method to finally quit smoking. Whenever he felt that intense urge, he just set a 10-minute timer on his watch. He wouldn't fight the feeling or shame himself for it. He would just observe it. And he noticed it was exactly like a wave. It would get really strong around the 3-minute mark, and then it would always fade away, every single time.
So, observing the urge is step one. But what do you do instead? That's where our next tool comes in, the art of Kaizen. Now, Kaizen, it's this amazing Japanese philosophy that totally goes against our culture's obsession with huge, dramatic, overnight makeovers. Instead, it's all about making tiny, consistent 1% improvements over time.
The secret sauce here is to make the steps, and I love this phrase, insultingly small. So small that your brain can't even come up with a good reason to say no. You want to watch less TV? Don't try to go cold turkey. Just cut back by 5 minutes a night. Want to stop impulse shopping? Just make a rule to wait 24 hours before buying anything. It seems too simple, but that is precisely why it works.
And there's actually some really cool brain science behind why this is so effective. See, when you try to make a massive change, your brain's alarm system, this little part called the amygdala, it freaks out. It senses a threat and it floods you with fear and resistance. But these tiny, Kaizen-style changes, they're so small, they just slip right under the radar. No alarm bells, no resistance, just slow, steady, undeniable progress. Okay, so we're observing our urges and taking tiny steps. But here's the thing, you can't just leave a vacuum where a bad habit used to be. You have to fill it with something meaningful. And that brings us to our third principle, finding your why.
or what the Japanese call Ikigai.
Ikigai, you might have heard of it, it basically translates to your reason for being. It's about finding that thing that truly gives your life purpose and meaning. Now, why does this matter for breaking bad habits? Because so many of our bad habits are just clumsy attempts to fill a void where our Ikigai should be. They're misguided shortcuts to find relief, or connection, or a sense of purpose.
Here's a great example. There was a programmer who realized his habit of having a few drinks every evening wasn't really about the alcohol at all. It was his ritual for switching off his work brain and transitioning into home life. That was the aha moment. Once he understood the real need the habit was serving, he could replace it with a new ritual that was way more fulfilling: sketching. He met the exact same need, but in a way that actually made him feel good about himself.
Now, of course, this journey isn't a straight line. You're going to have slip-ups. So what happens then? This is where the fourth principle comes in, and honestly, it might be the most important one of all: compassion over criticism.
This really gets to the core of why that whole willpower thing just backfires on us. We think that shaming and criticizing ourselves is motivating, but all it does is create this toxic cycle of failure and rebellion. You just can't hate yourself into becoming someone you love. Real lasting change can only grow from a foundation of self-acceptance. So next time you slip up, the goal is not to beat yourself up. Instead, just get curious. Ask yourself a couple of simple questions with no judgment. What was I feeling right before that happened? What deeper need was I trying to meet? This simple, gentle inquiry turns what feels like a failure into a super valuable piece of data that you can use for next time. All right, let's pull all of this together with one final, really powerful metaphor that perfectly explains how this whole process works in our brains. It's all about building a new path.
I want you to imagine your bad habit is like a big, well-worn path through a forest. It's wide, it's clear, and your brain just follows it automatically without even thinking. Now here's the key. You can't just go in there and erase that path. It's too deep. But what you can do is start forging a new path right beside it. At first, this new path is going to be tough. You have to pay attention, push through some branches, but every single time you choose to walk that new path, it gets a little bit clearer, a little bit easier. And meanwhile, that old path, unused, it slowly starts to get overgrown with weeds.
And that, right there, is the perfect model for how our brains are literally rewired. New neural pathways aren't formed by one single heroic act of willpower. They are built through patient, consistent repetition. It's just about walking that new path again and again and again until it becomes the easiest, most natural route to take.
So, what if that habit you've been fighting for years isn't your enemy at all? What if it's actually a teacher, a messenger, trying to show you where your life is out of balance, or what deep, important need isn't being met? Maybe the real question isn't, how do I destroy this habit? But what is this habit trying to teach me?